Do you feel like you are in a season that you're almost ready to burn out? I appreciate you listening into the Parable Podcast. And if this is your first time, welcome. I'm your host, Danielle Zapchenk. Joining me today is co-founder of Legacy Roots Co., Kayla Cornish. She discusses how a season of burnout left her depleted.
I think it really came down to the fact that I truly believed that doing more made me more valuable, and maybe more significant. I mean, in that season, I really believed that the work I did for God was more important than being with God.
Here's my conversation with Kayla Cornish. I am so thrilled for you to meet Kayla. You may remember her husband, Christian, from episode 146, if you're counting along. But Kayla is here today. Kayla, thank you so much for being a part of the Parable Podcast.
Yes, thank you so much for having me, Danielle. It's truly an honor to be here. And honestly, I love the work that you are doing, just bringing the body of Christ stories to the table here so that we can all be edified and encouraged by each other. It's truly a beautiful work you're doing.
Oh, thank you. So grateful for those encouragements. I really appreciate that, Kayla. You guys live in Asheville, North Carolina. That is one place I really do want to go. It's like a foodie town. Am I correct?
It really is. Yep. Oh. It's gorgeous.
So, and Christian says you are a great cook as well.
That is very sweet of him. I do love to cook, and I really have made myself a student trying to learn from anyone that I can on how to cook better. So yeah, I do love it.
What are some top places in Asheville that you get out and go to?
Well, with 6 kids, it's honestly hard to get out for a date night. We do a lot of date nights in. We cook together. We'll make pasta and fun things like that. But we did a date night a couple weeks ago. It was a restaurant called Curate, and it's a Spanish tapas. And we have been dying to go to this restaurant. And so we had the chance to go and have a major 6-course meal. And yeah, it was really amazing.
That sounds so fantastic. That's really how I do plan most of our trips, is based around food.
Yes. Amen.
I guess I shouldn't even say trips, what are we going to do this week? And I'm if we can find a new restaurant, that is the joy of my life. And hopefully it's good. But at the same time, I also do like cooking as well. Let me just share one of my things that I'm super excited about, and it's slightly dorky, but there's this giant menu board that we got a while ago, and I put the whole month up. And I schedule it all out, because every Sunday when I go grocery shopping and have to do the grocery list, the act of thinking and figuring out what I want to do is so agonizing.
Yeah, so much energy.
Yeah. So to walk in and just to be able to be okay, here's our things, and I know what ingredients. It has changed my life.
Rhythm. That's a great rhythm you have. I feel a lot of people are more spur of the moment. They'll be walking through the grocery store being what am I going to cook tomorrow? I need to get a few things here for Friday. But having it planned out, I bet that really creates more peace for your family.
It has not been always like that. Let me just tell you that. But yeah, that really does help me. Kayla, you are a mom of 6. How do you find time to be alone? If you want to be alone, I should say.
That is such a good question. And probably, honestly, I think a lot of people think when you have any number of children, really, they assume your life is crazy busy, especially in our case, maybe kids hanging from the chandelier, drawing on the walls, it's just constant chaos. So how can you get a moment to yourself? But we have, over the years and through learning a lot, really, truly, the Lord has taught us so much about how to be intentional with our rhythms of rest, and specifically how to be alone when we're amidst the chaos, and how to just be really disciplined with it, but intentional. And so for me, I just have built-in rhythms into my daily life that help me to and I don't want to say escape, because it's not really to escape. It's more to really plug into the Father in a more rejuvenating way. So for me, it's the mornings. I will sacrifice a little bit of sleep to get that quiet time in the morning before the kids rise, and to just spend time with God. And then we also are very passionate about quiet times in the afternoon. And I have been since the kids were super little, since our first baby. We have established just afternoons are always going to be silent in our house. And we all need it. Like even the kids, I feel like they need to have that space to just be quiet, to still their mind, have that space for their hearts to just relax. And so that is very helpful. It's just kind of the culture of the family that even on the weekends, we have very quiet afternoons. And then in the evening, I'm kind of a grandma in this way. I love to do like old crafts that are, I feel like kind of disappearing these days, but like embroidery is like a new craft I've taken up. And so when the kids go to bed at night, I will just sit down and watch a show and embroider, or I'll just have a few moments to myself that's peaceful and quiet. But so just kind of daily mundane rhythm.
Yes. I'm sure your kids have now gotten adjusted to it, but I remember as a kid when my mom would be like, Danielle, it's time to take a nap or have some quiet time. It was like a swear word. Like it was like, no.
I remember this too.
Absolutely not.
Totally.
But now it's almost
rebellion.
And even when I say that to our kids, like, hey, like, let's just, maybe you should just go take a nap. It is just like such an aggressive word.
Really? I know the kids resist it. Definitely.
Yeah. It's so odd. Yesterday, I was watching a video on Instagram and it was making me like tear up. And it was this dad talking to his oldest child about, hey, when you have a kid, like your first child is like, you're just figuring everything out. So in the end, it's just like, it's not because we're like trying to like mess up or make these mistakes, because we will, because we're imperfect. But it's just like, we are growing up with you at the same time, because parenting is something you don't know with your first child. Like, and also every other child after that is different. It's unique. I would be curious, what is something that you have learned from parenting that you're like, oh, I didn't realize, or this has been a real challenge for me?
I would say that I did not expect the decision fatigue that I would experience as a parent. You are making decisions for these little kids and helping them to make decisions all day long, whether it's like, Mom, can I have a snack? Or, I don't want that snack, so can you show me other options? And it's just basic like that, to even the bigger decisions for their school and helping them with their projects. Or even the other day, my daughter came home and she had a situation with her friend who, it was a tough relational moment for her. And I wanted to coach her through that. And instead of like trying to make the decision for her, like, you should go and tell her this and figure this out, it's like carrying all of these moments throughout the day where your mind is just constantly either making decisions for them, helping them make decisions. And it gets so exhausting, like in a different level, like not just physically. I'm sure you even feel this with teenagers now, just like the mental gymnastics that take place. So that I feel like I have had to rely on the Lord's strength mentally more than I ever thought possible, and resisting the urge to be kind of crazy and chaotic that the world kind of, I feel like, puts a pressure on parents. Like all the things our kids can be in. I feel like I feel that tension a lot as a parent, where it's like, get your kids in basketball and soccer and track and gymnastics and dance. And, oh, wait, there's after school clubs that your kids can be a part of. And, oh, it's going to be all weekend because there's games all weekend. And, there's just this pressure to kind of balance it all. And I feel like we have really tried, Christian and I have tried hard to, what's the decision we're going to make for our family based on our values, like our family values, and not what the world is assuming or pressuring us or thinks we should do. So I think that's also been a challenging thing that we've had to work through. I think we were probably more peer pressured early on in our parenting versus today. I feel like we are much more deeply rooted in who we are as a family. We know what our roots are, and we'll make decisions, I think, a little bit easier and quicker today than we did early on.
Kayla, sometimes when I talk to moms or just women in general, we kind of forget sometimes what we're passionate about because you have so many decisions that you're making, other people that you're in charge of, that our personality gets woven into other people almost, which is beautiful and like sacred. But I would love to know, like, what are you personally passionate about?
I feel like that's such a beautiful question for all of us as women to ask ourselves, because you're right. Like, we can lose bits and pieces of maybe who we were before kids, or even before the career, or before, life transitions. And we have to remind ourselves, we get to remind ourselves that we didn't really lose this piece of ourselves. We just may not be prioritizing. And so it's not showing up frequently in our life. Like, maybe we don't have a rhythm around our passions. So we think we lost our passion, but we just didn't have a habit or a discipline to remind ourselves. Like the embroidery, for example, like I'm starting to become passionate about embroidery because I do it so often and I'm making it a discipline. So on a big picture level, I'm so passionate about raising up the next generation. We didn't set out to have 6 kids, and we're super grateful the Lord decided that for us and provided and blessed us with these 6 babies. But I love other people's kids too, so much. If I get a chance to be around my kids' friends, I'm just really thinking about, like, how can I encourage this child today, pour life into them? So definitely raising up the next generation to be deeply rooted Christ followers. That is my heartbeat, and really what we're about in our own company. We just really want to see the body of Christ become so unshakable in how they are so deeply rooted in their relationship with Christ. I think we see today especially, and I'm sure this has always been, but believers who are so shaky, just kind of like the wave. Scripture talks about being tossed around by the waves of the sea. And it's so heartbreaking to us to see people who have cried out and called upon the name of Jesus, and then years later completely walk away from their faith. That shakes me to my core. And so that, I think, is like my deepest passion, is to be able to see one Christ follower at a time just go deeper with his or her relationship with God to a point where there is no more question. Not questioning God, because I think we, in a healthy way, can ask honest questions of God, but we don't question, we no longer question his goodness or who he is in our life. And so that, I would say, is like the biggest passion. But I love other things. I'm a multi-passionate person, as I'm sure we all are on some level. Like, I love to travel. I've been blessed to be all over the world, and I love cuisine and food.
Well, Kayla, this podcast is really about stories. We heard from your husband, Christian, about what the season he was walking in. And I think when we all think about our own lives, we're like, is there anything? And we do. Like, there's so many different chapters, different seasons that we've walked through. And stories just like connect us in a way that we can somewhat visualize ours and get, it just like clicks something over in our brains. So, Kayla, I'd love for you to share what parable story of your life with us today.
Yeah, I would love to. And I want to connect our story. I'm going to share our story early on in our marriage of when we experienced a pretty significant burnout. I realized there was truths in our story that were connected. We've been married 11 years, going on 12. And so this story began way earlier than that, when I was in high school. During that season, I felt, and I put this on myself, the pressure to do it all. I've always been the do it all girl, the yes girl. I wanted to take on all of it, all the AP classes, honor society. I just wanted to do it all. And I think it came out of this desire to feel worthy. I felt like, and this might be a generational thing, but I think a lot of us feel like we have to keep doing in order to feel valuable. As a daughter, like an earthly daughter, I think I felt that pressure. And not that my parents said that specifically to me, so I'm not putting that on them, but more so I just felt that I had to be doing something to be worthy. But also as a daughter of the Father, like our Heavenly Father, I felt like, for some reason, I felt like if I could just share the gospel with more people, if I could witness as much as possible and pray harder and read my Bible more, I felt like that truly was going to make me a quote unquote better Christian. And so that drove me into this kind of just workaholism even before career, that in college, it just kept going. It was like this train that was not going to stop, just catching up with more speed. And I took on so many things, more than I could handle in college. I wanted to have the robust social life, of course, but I wanted to be in student government, which I did. And I wanted to have a double major. I wanted to do so much that I think it was hurting me on multiple levels, like physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, all the ways. But because I was going so fast, I didn't even have the time to reflect or to even think about how it was hurting me. And so I think because it was so normal, I didn't even question the fact that I was only sleeping 4 hours a night. Like truly, I was sleeping 4 hours a night. My roommates were like, we never see you because you come in after we're in bed and you leave before we wake up. And so I just thought, oh, well, I'm trying to contribute to the college and contribute to people's lives. And I'm doing all these good things. I was at a Christian college. And so that leads me into early in our marriage because I met Christian in college. We got married right after school. And so we were young and married and we had our babies like right away, like unexpectedly. So we found out within the first year we were pregnant. And in that same season, we were the yes people again. It was just so normal. And so this might sound really exhausting because it is, but we were at this season both building careers. So I was a dietitian. He was working in finance. We had 2 little babies at the time when I remember all this kind of crashed down. And we were co-pastoring a church together. Wow. And we started a new business in that season.
Just a few things.
Just a couple light things. So, yeah, it was a honestly beyond crazy season. We would crash into bed at night. And it was like we turned on Netflix just to numb ourselves because we were so exhausted, purely exhausted. And like when you get to that point where you're holding up like so many, you're like keeping up so many balls in the air. I think that visual is kind of like, it's good because we are balancing a lot as women and as men. We're all balancing a lot. And this was a point in my life where I felt like I couldn't keep any of them up anymore, not even one. I felt like I was failing in every area and every single ball just came crashing down. I felt like I was a failure, truly, as a leader in the church, as a mom, as a wife, as a business owner. I felt like I had zero energy for anybody anymore. And it was almost like this like pendulum swing of like going from like working crazy and living this life that I thought I should live to all of a sudden swinging all the way back over like a pendulum to wanting to like just zone out, numb out completely. And if we are honest with ourselves, that's not really true rest. Like when we get to a point of so much burnout or sickness or illness where we just are forced into this season of like massive recovery where we want to shut out the people in our life and just Netflix and chill all day. That is not true, deep, soul rejuvenating rest that the Bible talks about in the Sabbath. And what I really do believe is the gift of the Sabbath. In that season, we did it Sabbath. We were leading ministry. We were ministering to people, but yet on the home front, we were not taking that time to rejuvenate ourselves. So that is when we really honestly hit a breaking point, to the point where we were very much suffering in our marriage. There were some really hard things going on in our marriage that I do believe the Lord will give me clearance to share about at some point, but we weren't even facing it because we didn't have the time to even deal with the hard stuff. That was our choice. We chose to live this crazy, busy life. And we ended up going into counseling in that season. So we had 2 small kids. We chose to get some support. And that was like a 3-year process from that point forward of meeting with our counselor weekly, getting mentorship. We sought out people that we really respected as deeply rooted followers of Christ to pour into us in this season and to really walk alongside of us. And it was through that journey of just really leaning in and surrendering the craziness that we learned about the gift of Sabbath. And it honestly transformed us. The moment we took it seriously and realized this gift wasn't just like when we needed it, it was available every single week, 24 hours hour rest period every single week that we could just completely accept without guilt, without shame, that it was part of like how we were actually made, was just to be human beings. It was through that our life, our family life, our marriage, our spiritual life, like everything transformed by having a weekly intentional Sabbath. So now today I feel like it's a critical part of going deeper in Christ, how we have grown. And so I think about the parable of the sower. So the parable of the sower is in Matthew 13, Mark 4, Luke 8. And in that parable, Jesus was teaching to a large crowd beside a lake. And he was talking about how the seed, which is the gospel, falls on different variety of soils. And he shared the 4 different soils. And basically what he was trying to get at was that the good soil was that someone who would hear the word, understand it, and then that seed would then turn into a crop that would yield 30, 60 times what was sown. And I do think about like these variety of soils in that parable, the 4 types of soils. The first one being like the path, that was the hard one, that the enemy just snatched away the seed before it could ever like take root. And then the second soil was the rocky soil. So that one was the one that's too shallow. So that one is where like your faith just isn't strong enough to survive. The roots are too shallow. Then there's the thorns, the soil that there's just distractions and things kind of creeping in the space that there's no room for the plant to take root and thrive. But then that 4th soil, the good soil, that is where the gospel can take root. It can flourish, then reproduce the fruit in our life. And through our burnout, I realized I want to be a believer who produces fruit, of course. That's the doing in me. I want to produce fruit. But I want to be the believer who has the life that is so open and ready in this nourished soil that the gospel seed can just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper. And so we hear a parable like that and we think, well, okay, that sounds great. I want to have good soil. I think we all want to have the good soil. But how do we do that? How do we have good soil? And I think that's where the Sabbath, and I think that's where healthy rhythms come into play. It's ways that we can practically nourish the soil of our life so that the gospel can just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And so that is what we've strived to do in our company, is really equipping modern day believers on how to practically do this. How do you practically honor the Sabbath? We're living in 21st century. We have so many differences in our life today than Jesus even experienced in the Sabbath. So I think that's the piece that we have over the years really made ourselves students of.
Kayla, I resonate with this so much. Firstborn over here. And again, I don't believe anything that my parents did, that created this. I just was the person in college. I had 7 jobs, not every day. And then of course, I was a yes girl. I think I'm a recovering yes girl. Yeah. I'm realizing it's okay to say no. You reach this state of burnout at a very young age. Like you said, you and Christian got married right after college. So you're talking about in your 20s, already experiencing burnout. If you could kind of talk about what do you feel like that root was for you that you wrestled with, or I know you didn't realize it yet, but what was it that you were just trying to prove, or, did you not want to let people down? Did you feel like you weren't worthy?
I think it really came down to the fact that I truly believed that doing more made me more valuable. More valuable and maybe more significant. I hate to admit this, but in that season, I really believed that the work I did for God was more important than being with God.
Wow.
If I think about even that season, I read my Bible because I thought that reading my Bible was the right Christian girl thing to do. If I did check that off for the day, I was not going to be as good of a Christian. Whereas he really just was like, Kayla, just come have a cup of coffee with me. Just sit, be with me. Just hang out. You don't have to do anything. I love you just the same. I think that didn't click with me until I faced a point where I couldn't do any more. And I still felt not valuable enough.
Yeah, it is odd because I like to do so many things, which is good. Like, that's great. When God was like, I do want to just sit down and have a cup of coffee, I'm like, I feel like I need to be doing something right now. Like, do you want me to sit here? Should I be doing some jumping jacks? Like, should I doing some spiritual yoga? Like, it's so hard for me to like pull that back because, I would say I agree. And I feel like the same way. You said also earlier that like making the time to be with God, that had to cause you to stop in order to deal with the hard stuff. And so by creating rhythms or just realizing what is happening in your world right now, you have to choose to lean in. And that's something we have to choose to do on ourselves between God before we like connect with anyone else, because then that extends to our family or friends, coworkers, whatever. Tell me the process of you recognizing I need to lean in.
Yeah, I remember sitting in the counseling chair for the first time, not thinking we'd be a couple years into our marriage and now we're getting counseling. We walked into the room and we sat there was a couch on one side and then there were two chairs on the other side that were not attached. Yeah. And we chose to sit in the two chairs, the two separate chairs. And I get like emotional thinking about that moment because it was like we had such a disconnect in our marriage. And I knew in that moment there was like, when you see smoke, there's fire. That was like the smoke of like, there is something significantly wrong here. And I knew that it was like getting that hour in once a week at the counselor's office was like one of the rare moments we had to talk about our marriage. And I thought to myself, this is not right. It should not be that our life is so full of ministry and trying to help other people that we don't even have enough time to build our own marriage. And we both love Jesus. And even in that season, I remember we were still making time to read our Bibles, each morning. Like we still were doing what you quote unquote, good Christian things. And yet it was like our marriage was crumbling. And I think that was the point where I was like, we have got to lean into Jesus if we are going to see a transformation here and have a long lasting marriage that leaves a legacy. And so that it was probably sitting in those counseling chairs that we were literally leaning into the chair and leaning into the fact that God wanted to reveal something more for us. And it was a process, it was like a several year process of leaning in where we really were surrendering a lot. That was a really hard season. We realized that we had said yes to too much. And so now we needed to start simplifying, and the Lord kept revealing what he needed us to get rid of and what he wanted us to make space for. And a lot of it was actually just making space to just be. So we had a really good balance eventually in our weekly life of doing and being. It wasn't like super heavy in the doing, but like eventually he really did balance that out for us, that both are significant now for us.
You said earlier in the episode when you were talking about being a mom, it's the decision fatigue. And for some people, not to name names myself, who are yes people or recovering yes people, like it's a battle, I feel. And again, I've explained this to people where no one is like upset if I say no, but it's in my head that I have to work through. I'm like, what are they going to think about that? Right. It's this constant little chit chat in my head. But sometimes like the no is more holy. It's that access to surrender. How would you encourage people to step into the no, to be able to surrender into this season of rest or whatever they need in their life?
That's so good. And I relate to that little chit chat in the head of like almost that pressure that we put on ourselves of like, if I say no to this, and maybe it's even the fear of missing out. I think there's that piece of it too, besides just our own pressure. It's like, what will we miss out if we say no to this opportunity? We have to face that a lot actually on our Sabbath. We Sabbath on Friday night to Saturday night. And if you can imagine, Saturday is a very common day to be asked for kids' birthday parties or weddings, all these different events, sporting things. And we have had to become ruthless with our no in order to maintain the greater yes, which for our family truly is having that total 24-hour rest day of massive rejuvenation. So I think the biggest thing is getting really clear on just the core of what you want your life to look like. Do you want to continue living the crazy busy hamster wheel? I feel like I can't get out of this life forever. Or do you envision something else? Do you envision a more peaceful way of living, a life where you can do both and you can do the work God has called you to do, and you can rest and be with God freely without guilt. So getting really clear, I think, is a good step, because my husband and I, we really worked through our family values. We actually teach that and how to discover those. I think that's critical, because our family is very clear on who we are, what our values are, and we make space for those things. And so that's one thing. I think when you say yes to something, you're also saying no to something else. So really counting the cost, before you make a quick yes, take a moment, like maybe it's 24 hours, you make a rule for yourself. I'm going to just, before I commit to something, I'm going to take a whatever period of time and make a slow yes. So that way, if I do say yes, I know that it's something I feel confident that what I'm saying no to is what I really want to say no to. Like it is very rare, almost a 0% chance now for our family to say no to Sabbath. We will swing the Sabbath. Like if something does happen to come up on a Saturday, like a wedding, for example, that we know we really want to be at, and it's not going to be restful because we have to get all the kids ready and travel to the wedding or whatever, we will then make that Sabbath be on Sunday so that we can make sure to still get it in. Being really clear on, if you say yes to something, what does the no look like? And I think the biggest thing is just that clarity for yourself, like that deep desire of what do you want your life to be, and being confident in that.
Absolutely. Kayla, I think for the listener, they are hearing you guys have done this so much. This is like a part of your daily rhythms, your weekly rhythms, I should say. I remember Christian mentioned you guys eat candlelight. Like it sounds beautiful. I want to know, what was the first Sabbath like? Well, tell me what happened to get to this point.
So good. Honestly, I always say this, that Sabbath is one of those love-hate relationships at first, because you love it for a moment and then you kind of hate it for like the work that you're not getting to do. And eventually it becomes a passionate love relationship. Like you will not ever want to go without it once you get to a good rhythm with it. But it probably took us a solid, I would say 6 months at the minimum, if I'm remembering correctly, 6 months to maybe even a year before we felt like, wow, the Sabbath feels good. Like we feel like we can do this. It feels rejuvenating. The kids aren't, going crazy about it. Everyone's on the same page. The very first Sabbath that we took, I remember we took a half day Sabbath. So we started with just a couple hours, and we're like, okay, on a Sunday afternoon, we're going to just try this, where we're going to set our phones aside, literally put them away so we can't see them. And we're going to not check our email. We're not going to do any work whatsoever. We're not going to do dishes. We're not going to vacuum or clean up. We're just going to be for 3 hours with each other and do something that fills our cup. And I think we did that for a little bit, where we just maybe every other week, we took a couple hours, like a half day. And once we started to feel kind of this like desire for more, that's when we leaned into growing the Sabbath and making it a little bit more doable. So it did require us to start thinking about the rest of the week. How do we transform the rest of our week so we can make Sabbath possible? Because we do have a full life. We have the 6 kids, we have work, we have business. So there's a lot of work that we get to do throughout the week, and all of the house rhythms, laundry, meal planning, grocery shopping. Some people think like, how do you do the Sabbath without doing any of those things on a whole day of the week? But it's because over time, like we've been honoring the Sabbath for almost 8 years now, every single week. And it's because over time, within those 8 years, we have learned how to live a Sabbath lifestyle where the week actually is designed around our Sabbath. We are very intentional about having certain rhythms in place that are really non-negotiables. Like some people think that certain things in their life are non-negotiables, like a doctor's appointment, which is important. Like our laundry rhythm is like literally a non-negotiable for us because we know if we do it, then we don't have to do anything on Sabbath. So things like that, I would say, have helped us.
Kayla, if you could go back and talk to yourself when you were sitting in those chairs in your counselor's office, what would you say to that Kayla today?
I would tell her there's like so much more to God. And if you keep pressing in, if you keep going deeper, like if you keep allowing yourself to be healed, allow God to heal you in your stillness, there will be so much more to life than you can ever imagine. And so much more to God that you can hardly even believe that there is. And so I would encourage her to just keep going deeper and to press into the hard, to just take time to be and to stop doing so much. And that her value is as valuable when she is just being and just resting as she is when she is doing all the things.
So good, Kayla. And I hope that as the listener, you heard that as a prayer for yourself. Just insert your name here. Right. Because we have so much worth, and we need to remind ourselves, because I'll say this over and over to anyone else I meet, but for myself, like it's so hard for me to hear that and to recognize it and to be reminded of it. So good. Kayla, if people wanted to get connected to you, Christian Legacy Roots Co., how can they do that? What do you guys offer?
So they can find us at legacyrootsco.com is our website, and you'll find a lot of free resources there. We are on Instagram at Legacy Roots Co., and you can find me personally at Kayla T. Cornish. T as in Tom, so Kayla T. Cornish. It actually stands for Therese, not Tom. But I share our family's weekly meal plan every single week as just a free resource. So if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see our family's weekly meal plan. And if you need help with that meal planning rhythm, we just try to make it easier for people. So we just give our meal plan, and you get recipe links and the whole kit and caboodle. So if you would like Sabbath ideas, like if you're somebody who doesn't really know what to do if you were to have a whole day for rest, we have a resource called 101 Ideas to Do on Your Sabbath. And you can find that at legacyrootsco.com/Sabbath ideas. And I know you'll put that in the show notes, Danielle. Yeah. So you guys can get that resource. I'm hoping that just blesses you as you enhance your Sabbath if you're already practicing it, or even just beginning if you're brand new at this practice, because we all have to start somewhere. So it's nice to have some ideas on what to do.
Well, Kayla, it has really been a pleasure to get to know you and also your husband, Christian. I really think you guys are just building such a foundation, not only for your kids, but you're right, like for these future generations. And we hope as we look towards the future that our kids are just like, you don't do Sabbath?
Yes.
You know?
Totally.
Like it's like something totally foreign. So,
so good.
Thank you for that encouragement and just guidance in your story today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danielle. Grateful to be here.
My hope is that you as a listener can hear a part of Kayla's story and it resonates with something that is within your own, and you recognize that God has been there all along, every step of the way in all of your parable stories, and that there is that connection point today that you realize He loves you, He's there, He doesn't want you to burn out. To connect with Kayla or Legacy Roots Co., simply visit daniellezapchenk.com for details. And here are 2 reflection questions from our time with Kayla. Number 1, I'd love for you to reflect on your last week. How have you been struggling with being a yes person, or just the pressure to show your worth? Journal about what that has meant to you, how you're feeling about that today. Number 2, we want our hearts to be the good soil, right? Like in the parable story, to have God grow deeper into our life. But in order to do that, we have to deal with the hard things that are underneath. What is those hard things that you need to deal with today? One easy way you can support the Parable Podcast is simply by sharing it with a friend. If you could pass that episode along today, maybe it's also Kayla's episode and Christian's episode. It's like a little partner duo that really helps people find find out about these amazing parable stories. We also appreciate Eric, my husband, for his editing skills. He makes us sound so great every single time. That is going to do it for today. I'm grateful that you spent it with me. Remember, your parable showcases how God is always waiting on the other side of burnout. We'll see you back again next week on the Parable Podcast.